Well, thank you for the wonderful introduction, and thank you, particularly Guillermo, for inviting me down here to Buenos Aires, which is such a beautiful city. And in advance, I will thank the translators who will have to endure the next 65 or so minutes with me as a presenter. Thank you for the introduction. I didn't catch it all, unfortunately. I don't speak much Spanish, but I can speak some Russian and some German and some Chinese. So if anybody wants to hear that, I can speak in that language if you would like. But I'm a substitute teacher today. Guillermo called me on Tuesday morning and said, how would you like to teach a class on sales management? I said, that's wonderful. I would be more than glad to. But I used to be a high school teacher before I got into this business. And I remember what it was like to be a substitute teacher. All the students were expecting the real teacher, and they ended up with a substitute. So hopefully you won't be too disappointed in me as a substitute teacher today. But what I want to talk about is sales management. And a lot of us who have grown up in this industry, sales is sometimes a dirty word. You know, I started off as a group exercise instructor. I taught aerobics. Don't I look like I taught aerobics? And then I was a personal trainer. Then I was a fitness director, club manager, and eventually was a senior vice president for a large company that had about 200 clubs. So I've done all the jobs, but the one job I really didn't like when I got into this business was sales. I said, I don't like having to sell, because I always thought of used car salespeople. But the thing is, in our industry, sales is the most important thing that you can do day in and day out. But sales can never be successful without a sales management process. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. I don't know how many of you know, but globally in our industry, whether it's here, whether it's in India, whether it's in Russia, 80 to 90% of the money that we make comes from members and membership sales. So if we're not really good at managing sales, we'll never be very, very good at generating a profit. So my goal today is to go over that process. And my computer is not working really well, so I will do it this way. So give me a second. I'm just going to have to go off of this one here. So what are the objectives today? First will be, so going to go over the sales management process. What is sales management? So that you have a clear understanding of that. My second objective will be to really discuss the various steps of sales management is sales planning. Because sales planning is the most important thing that you can do in sales management. So we're going to spend some time on two areas. Planning for your club, but then helping you plan for each of the salespeople in your club. The third objective I have is to go over the importance of hiring, recruiting, and training salespeople. In this industry, and I can only speak for the countries I've been in, the highest rate of turnover in our industry is with salespeople. And so that if you want to be successful, what I want to be able to do is help you understand how do you really hire, train, and motivate your salespeople. And obviously I want to provide you some insight in how do you lead salespeople. Salespeople are different than anybody else. They're very emotional. You go through a lot of highs and a lot of lows in sales. And as a sales manager, you have to be able to help people get through that. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And lastly, we're going to talk about running a sales meeting. So that's sort of the gist of what we're going to talk about today, are all those different aspects of the business. So what I'd like to begin with is the whole process of sales planning. And why do we sales plan? What is the value? Okay. They're having fun today. So what I want to do is talk about this whole sales management process. And to first understand that you can't be successful at sales unless you have a management process. There's a gentleman in California, his name is Bill McBride. He is a chief operating officer for a company called Club One. Before that, he was the vice president of sales. Before that, he was the vice president of sales for another company called Sport and Health. And I asked him what he thought contributed to his company's success in sales. Year in, year out, they probably sell better than any of the club companies in the U.S. And he says it was because they had such a phenomenal sales management process. They manage every single step of the process. And so I only share that story of what he said because that's what we're going to talk about today, is how important it is to have a process to manage sales. And what it's going to be about is how do you integrate planning with motivation. We're going to talk about, and I should put these up here, I'm so used to talking without putting them up here, is we're going to talk about how do you integrate creating a sales plan, hiring the right people, helping those people develop their own sales plan, motivating and coaching those people, providing the right rewards and incentives to get them to continue to perform. And that's really what the sales management process is about. And we're going to talk about how do you create and sustain an environment in your club to make sure that people are always achieving their plan. So that's sort of the gist of what the sales management process is. So we're going to start with how do you plan at the club level, how do you plan at the individual level, how do you hire, train, and develop people so that they can actually achieve. We're going to talk about how do you run a sales meeting so you always keep people on track. And last but not least, we're really going to talk about how do you motivate and lead people. How do you make sales a game in your club? And just give you an example why sales management is important. There's a company in the U.S. that's called Lifetime Fitness. Lifetime Fitness requires in its club to have 10,000 members per club for it to work. In a Lifetime Fitness club, their retention rate is 50%, which means every year they lose 5,000 members, which means they got to sell 5,000 memberships a year to stay afloat. That works out to almost 100 memberships a week they have to sell. Their average club has 20 salespeople in it. You better be really good at managing the sales process if you're going to get 20 people to achieve. About 4 years ago, I went to a club in Hong Kong. It's a place in Hong Kong called Kowloon. And it's a club called California Fitness. I'm not sure why they called it California Fitness in Hong Kong. He had 30 salespeople on his staff. They had 10,000 members in the club. His retention rate was 0. He had to sell 10,000 memberships a year because he'd lose them every year. So he had 25 salespeople who were selling. He had to have a pretty incredible sales management process to make that work. Now, I'm not going to tell you you be like them. I think it's terrible that you have to sell that much. But everybody does have to sell. And I had the good fortune yesterday with Guillermo to go out and visit some of the really nice clubs here in Buenos Aires. And it was interesting to find a lot of clubs don't even have a salesperson. So if you don't have a salesperson, then obviously you don't have a sales management process. And I will tell you, to be successful in this business, 1, you need a salesperson, and 2, you need a sales management process. And that's what we're really going to talk about. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how much organization is needed to do this, because it's a real detailed process. A person who's a good salesperson may not necessarily be a good sales manager, because they have to be really good at coaching and leading people to be a really good sales manager. So it's a little bit of a different job function, so to speak. In the U.S., many times, the club general manager is actually a sales manager. That general manager has to manage his sales teams. That's what I had to do. In some of your bigger clubs, for example, David Lloyd Leisure in the United Kingdom, or World Class in Moscow, or you go to Konami Company in Japan, their general managers don't manage sales. They have their own separate sales managers in each club because they're so big. But this would apply whether you're a manager or whether you're a sales manager. I'm going to give up on this one. I'm just going to go with what's up here. So we're going to talk about the first step. We're going to talk about sales planning. Okay? And how do you sales plan for a club? And the first thing I'm going to tell you, there's a quote that goes, "The failure to plan is a plan to fail." So if you don't have a sales plan, you've automatically committed yourself to a plan to fail. Somebody else said that planning is about bringing the future to the present so that you can do something about it now. Okay? So that's what we're going to talk about, is sales planning for the club. And the first thing that you have to do in sales planning is you have to understand the historical trends of your own club. What happens in your club? And up there on the slide, it will tell you to go back and look at your prior year. I will tell you, if you're a club that's over a year old, go back and look at your last 2 or 3 years of business. Look at it from an annual basis. Look at it from a monthly basis. Look at it from a quarterly basis. How many sales did you have? How many people did you have resign? Look at both those things. You should know for your business how many members resign daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. You should also know what your sales have been. You should know when your peak sales periods are. And there's a reason to know that, because if you're going to plan for the next year, you want to know historically what type of patterns that you have. So that's the first thing you have to go back and do. So for example, if I'm in the United States, I know that the time of the year when I have the most resignations is June and July, and November and December. That's when I lose the most members. I also know in the US, the best time to sell is February, April, and October. That's when we have our highest sales. Interestingly, when I do my work in Russia, when I have my best sales periods is when they have their lowest ones. So they have to understand their culture is different than mine. So go back and understand. So go back and collect that data and graph it. If you haven't done that before, you should. The second thing I'm going to recommend that you do from a sales planning perspective is understand some of the industry benchmarks. And there's a reason for that. You want to be able to compare your historical trends against what the industry typically does. And there's a value to that. Am I performing as a club better, worse, or the same as the industry? Okay. That helps me plan for what I want to do in the future. And I put some numbers in there to talk about it from an industry perspective globally. And globally, I'm trying to take all the countries around the world. The average club has a retention rate somewhere between 50 and 90%. The average is 70% in the United States, which just basically means most clubs throughout the world, anywhere from 1 out of 10 to 1 out of 2 members will leave before the year is out. You should know that historically, that tends to be the nature of our business. How does your club compare against that? Is your retention better or worse? Secondly, is to understand that according to IHRSA data, last year, the average club globally lost 500 members during the year and sold 700 memberships. Think about that. 700 memberships was the average club. If you take that and you multiply that out by 52 weeks, the average club sells about 13 or 14 memberships a week. How many clubs in here sell 13 or 14 memberships a week? Anybody raise a hand? I didn't see any hands. But those are averages. I'm not sure what the average in Argentina is. I know in the US that that's pretty average. I know that in the United Kingdom, it's even higher than in the US. They do more sales. But you should know historically. You could call other clubs and find out. I know I asked a lot of the club managers yesterday how many sales that they do. The other thing that's maybe the most valuable, and this is probably a good benchmark for you, is to know that on average in this industry, you're typically going to have to sell every year at least the number of memberships equal to between 30 and 35% of what your base membership is. So if you have a club with 1,000 members, no, you're probably going to have to sell about 300 to 350 memberships a year to stay afloat. That's not to grow, that's just to stay afloat. I only share those statistics because I think it's really important to understand that if you're going to sales plan, that you understand not only your historical trends, but you also go ahead and understand what the industry's trends are. Okay? The third thing you need to do is clarify what your sales goals need to be by looking at your club's business plan. Where does your business in general want to be next year? I mean, do you want to make more money? Do you want to grow revenues? And how does that impact membership? I'll give an example. Let's say that you've decided you want to grow your business 10% next year. And you go back and historically look at your sales trends and find out that on average you sell 200 memberships a year. And you haven't really been growing. That's going to tell you that if you've been selling 200 memberships a year the last couple of years, and you've sort of stayed even, but you want to grow this year, that you're going to have to increase that sales goal. So I guess my point is in sales planning, after you track industry trends, after you understand your own trends, is go to your regular business plan and say, what do I want to accomplish as a club overall? What impact does that have on membership? And lastly, in sales planning, perform a competitive study. Know your competitors. What are their dues? What are they charging? How many members do they have? Where are they getting their members from? Are they getting members from a similar geographic area as you? It's really important in the sales planning process. In a company I used to work for, Club Corp, when I used to manage the sales process, I would require all of our sales managers to go out, along with the salespeople, and visit at least 6 competitive clubs. And they had to find out what the pricing was at those clubs, how many members the club had, where they were getting their members. Because I wanted to know what influence my competitors were going to have on my ability to plan for sales the next year. Because if I knew a new competitor was coming into town, that could be dangerous. So I always like to tell stories, so I'll share a story. How am I doing speed-wise, young ladies? So they want me to slow down. I managed a club in New York City called the Athletic and Swim Club. And we were in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. And we found out that opening up a block away from us was going to be a club called Equinox. It was going to open up in a year, a block away from us. We also heard that this other club called Sports Club LA was going to open up a block to the other side of us. And that sort of put some fear in us because, oh my gosh, 2 new clubs in the same market as us. And what was interesting, they were both going to be priced less than my club was. And I said, how do I keep all those members? I don't want to lose them. So we had to go out, find out what the competitor was going to do. We had to create a sales plan that hopefully would keep us from losing members. And what was interesting, both those clubs opened up and we added 200 members. We didn't lose, we added. Because what we did is we found out what we needed to do differently than a competitor to keep our members. And whatever it is we did, because we had a plan, we were actually able to grow membership. So a sales plan can help you overcome some of the biggest challenges. But if instead you decide, let's just see what happens, people will walk in, you probably won't succeed as well. So the next step in sales planning that I want to talk about is determine what are your net membership goals for the year. Net membership. Net membership is the difference between how many memberships you sell and how many memberships you lose. Every club should have for the year a goal for how many net memberships. Even more importantly, I think you should have a goal for what I call net dues. What net dues is the difference between the dues that you bring in and the dues that you lose. Okay? Have a goal. Do you want to have a net membership of 100? Do you want to have net membership of 10? Do you want to have net membership of 0? What is going to be your goal? And the only way you can do that goal in planning is to first have gone back and know your historical trends, know your industry trends, know your competition, and know what your club's overall goals are. But pick a net membership goal. Okay? In a company that I worked for, Club Corp, we didn't do net membership, we did net dues, because the bodies wasn't important. It was the dollars that was important. Because in most clubs, they have different types of memberships. You might have an individual, a couple, a family. You might have there was a club yesterday that had a membership where you could buy a single club membership or a multiple club membership. Well, you make more money on a multiple than you do on a single. You make more money on an annual sale than you do on a monthly sale. So the goal isn't how many bodies I get in, it's how much money I bring in. So you got to identify a net goal, which is what the first thing that's up there. Okay? What you have to do in order to do that is know how many people you plan to lose that next year. Once you determine that net goal, then you can create your sales goal. Simply by thinking, okay, if I know I want to gain 100 members next year, I know I'm going to lose 200, that means I'm going to have to sell 300. And what I did is I just did a little chart here that I broke down by quarter. And I show in the blue, historically, how many members this club loses. Okay? And then what I put on the top is how many sales this club has to have in order to achieve its net membership goal. The white, or the light color, being the sales. So if you can identify a particular net membership goal, and you know what you're going to lose, then you can establish what your sales goal are. So that's part of the sales planning process. Now I'm going to ask, since I'm sort of at this stage, if anybody had a question in general now, or we can just wait till the end. I don't want you to get too tired. I want you to be a part of the process. So, does anybody have a question? Uh-oh. That's dangerous. Being a teacher, I know when someone doesn't have a question, it can mean one of two things. It means A, you're doing an incredibly bad job and they just want you to get it over with. Or you might be doing a good job, but I never think about the positive. So now let's take the second step. If you do create a sales plan for your club, you have to take it to another level. You have to take it down even further and say, okay, now that I've got this sales goal of how many sales I'm going to have, I have to go one step further. Knowing how many sales I have in my plan is important, because remember, to make a sale, you've got to have people come in the door. And to two words you got to remember is the word lead and prospect. Lead and prospect. A prospect is someone who has an interest in membership. A prospect would be someone that maybe came into your club and took a tour and said, you know, I'm interested, but I don't know if I'm ready to join now. That's a prospect. It may be someone who is a friend of a member, who's referred for membership. That person's a prospect because they have an interest or they know someone at the club. A lead is a name. A lead is just somebody whose name you got is someone you should call or follow up with for membership. Okay? And the thing to know about a sales plan is you can't just have a plan for how many sales you want to make. You have to have a plan for how many prospects you're going to get and how many leads. So I put an example up there. Typically in our industry, most salespeople will do what we call close 50% of their prospects. That means for every 2 prospects I have, I'm probably going to get 1 sale. That's pretty typical in the industry. Really good salespeople will close 80 to 90%, but on average it's 50%. I also know that typically I have to have 10 leads to get 1 prospect. Okay. So sales is what I call sales. It's a numbers game. It's not how good you are at closing a sale. It's how good you are at getting a lot of leads, therefore a lot of prospects, and by the laws of nature, you will automatically get enough sales. So the point I'm trying to make here in a sales plan is if I have a plan and I have to do 300 sales next year, how many prospects do I need to get 300 sales? Do I need 600? Do I need 800? And if I need that many prospects, how many leads do I need to have? That has got to be in your plan. Part of your plan has to be not just how many net members, but how many sales, how many prospects, and then how many leads. So for example, at Club Corp, we knew that typically we needed to have 10 leads for every sale. So if my salesperson had a sales plan of 500, that means they had to have 5,000 leads during a year. That's part of the sales plan. You have to identify that. Because the next step that you have to do, I'm sorry for not going on time, I talk on top of my head here, is that once I know how many prospects and leads I have, then in my sales plan I have to do, what am I going to do to get them? What strategies am I going to implement to drive that many leads or that many prospects? At World Class Fitness, which is one of my clients in Russia, Allah is the director of sales for the whole company. They have 25 clubs. And they have a quarterly sales plan. And for each club, they know exactly how many sales they have to have. She knows exactly how many prospects she has to have and how many leads. She also makes sure that they know exactly what things they have to do to generate those leads. So for example, in Moscow, the #1 source of membership leads is member referral, the #1 source. So in their sales plan, they list out all the different things that salespeople have to do to get member referrals. How are they going to get member referrals? The #2 source of leads at World Class is banners that are hung up over the streets in Moscow. They put all these signs up, not billboards, but actually like flags that go up over the streets. That's their #2 source of leads. So, and I found that unusual until I actually drove in Moscow and realized a typical person spends about 4 hours a day in a car. So they have nothing better to do than read signs above the street. But since she knows that in her sales plan, her salespeople have to know where do they put those signs up, how many signs they have to put up, where are people most likely to read those signs. And so what I put up here is I just put, and I'm sorry I didn't have any samples from Argentina, but I did have some samples from Brazil. The one on my left is from Biorritmo, and the one on the right is from Companhia Atlética, two very good companies in Sao Paulo and throughout Brazil. Now, one in their sales plan, I'll go over here for this one with the hippo and the donkey, is Richard Belton, who is the CEO of Companhia Atlética. He knows how many sales he has to have in every club, every week, every day. He knows how many prospects and leads. And in his sales plan, all the salespeople, they identify what do they do to get them. One of the things that works really good for him is what's called direct mail. Direct mail could be a postcard like this. It could be a CD. There's lots of different things. So they have in their sales plan how many direct mail campaigns they're going to do every year. They know they're going to do a direct mail campaign in January. They're going to do one in April. They're going to do one in September. It's in their plan. It's not like, oh, let's wait in September, I'm behind. What am I going to do? They've planned out a year ahead of time when they're going to send out a direct mail. Companhia Atlética also does video clips on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and type in Companhia Atlética, you'll find a really nice little video clip from Companhia Atlética. Part of their sales plan is that they're going to put the YouTube clip on and when they're going to put it on. So part of the sales plan is not just identifying a sales target, not just identifying how many prospects or leads you have to have, but it's also determining what actions or strategies you have to take in order to generate that many people coming through the door. And just so that you know, in our industry, member referral is still the #1 source of leads and prospects in our business. But you know what? You can't expect your members to bring them in the door for you. You have to have in your sales plan, what are you going to do to get people to refer people? Member referral is actually a very active type of plan. Same thing, the #2 thing that seems to work well is buzz marketing, which is using the internet, what they call viral marketing. And you have to have a plan for that, because when are you going to put the buzz out on the internet? Third is direct mail. So you have to identify when you're going to do your direct mail campaigns. In the US, a company called Lifetime Fitness, direct mail is what they do. I probably get 12 direct mail pieces a year. Every month I get one from Lifetime Fitness. Every single month I get one. They know that if they send out enough, they're going to get enough leads, and just by natural attrition, they'll make enough sales. So that's sort of the sales process from a club perspective. But if you're a good sales manager, you just can't have a club sales plan. You've got to take it right down to the individual. Thank you for pushing that button. You're so sweet. Not that I look at it a lot, but thank you very much. I appreciate it. Is that you got to make that sales plan for the club relevant to the salesperson. Now, I know a lot of the clubs that I visited yesterday have either 0 salespeople or they have 1 salesperson. Then it's pretty easy. The club sales plan becomes the individuals. But if I'm 24 Hour Fitness, who owns California Fitness in Hong Kong, and I have 25 salespeople, I've got to be able to take that sales plan for the club and make it personally relevant to each one of those 25 salespeople in the club. Each one of those salespeople has to have their own plan. So that's the second thing I'm talking about here. Not only do you have to have a club plan, you need to have a plan for each one of your salespeople. Every single one of them. I used to have a sales plan when I was with Club Corp. When I was a fitness director, I still had to sell. My sales plan wasn't for selling memberships, it was for selling personal training. I had to sell 150 personal training sessions a week. I knew that. So I had to make it relevant. So that's the first thing. You have to take those objectives and make them relevant to your salespeople. In order to do that, you need to assign goals to each one of your salespeople. Each salesperson needs to have their own target, their own goal. And I put a statistic up there that the average salesperson is capable of selling 8 memberships a week. Average. Maybe average to good salesperson sells 8 memberships a week. A really, really good person, excelente, would sell between 10 and 12, I think I got one word close to right, memberships a week. But now think about that. 10 memberships a week would require 20 prospects, would require 100 leads a week. So a good salesperson, a really good salesperson who can sell 10 memberships a week can generate 100 leads a week. That's a person that stays very, very busy. But so what you have to understand is that when you take this club sales plan and you bring it down to an individual, understand, is this an average salesperson you have on your staff, or are they a really outstanding person? And set a reasonable, realistic target, knowing what those statistics are. So there might be, you might have 5 salespeople, maybe one person's target is 5, another person's target might be 10. Because you know this other person, this is what they're capable of, and this person is capable of this. But you have to apply those targets all the way across the board. Okay? And part of that, what you have to do is help that salesperson create their own action plan. I'm going to put a sample up on the board in a second. You have to say to each salesperson, okay, our club goal is to sell 50 memberships a week. Yours is to sell 20. And in that 20, I know you're going to need this many prospects. What are the things that you're going to do? I have to help each salesperson have their own specific action plan as to exactly what they're going to do. And I wanted to put those up there so I can talk about them a little bit. Make sure that each salesperson has not only a target for sales, that each individual has a target for prospects, that they have a target for leads. But as I'll show in a second, every salesperson should know how many phone calls they have to make each day, how many club tours they should give every day, how many members they need to talk to get referrals every day. That's how specific you have to be. I was interested when I talked to Bill McBride, and I'm using a sample from his club here. This is what every one of his salespeople has every month. What he does is he takes his club sales plan, and every month each salesperson gets their own sales plan. And if you look at this, it has their name, but what you've heard, it has an objective for how many sales they have to make, how many phone calls they have to make, how many club tours they have to make. Okay? And if you keep going further down, it says how many new member contacts do they have to make. What new skills do they have to learn? And then it takes every single day and lists for that person every day how many sales they have to make. What I didn't put up there is he doesn't only put how many sales they have to make every day, he puts down how many phone calls they have to make every day, how many club tours they have to do every day, how many appointments they have to do every day. That's how specific a person's sales plan has to be. I know it sounds like a lot of work, but once you get a system in place, it's not that hard to do. So this is the second step in sales management, is going from this club sales plan to an individual sales plan. And the thing that I would tell you is the most important thing is to make sure a salesperson knows how many they have to sell every day, but they need to know what do they do every day to get there. How many calls do they have to make? How many appointments do they have to set? How many tours do they have to give? That actually has to be spelled out in their plan. And they do that with you. You don't, as a manager, do that. They need to work with you on that. You can't be doing all the work for them, but they have to set that up. And there's a reason why you have that sales plan for the individual, because as a sales manager, we'll talk about it in a little while, you're going to meet with them every day to see how they're doing. You're going to work with them. That's the second step. So now I'm going to go to the next process. So the first step in sales management, and I hope I'm doing okay time-wise, is that you do the club sales plan. The second step is you take this down to a person. The third thing is you got to hire and develop the right salespeople. gentleman wrote a book called Good to Great, Jim Collins, and he said simply that you got to get the right people on the bus and you got to get the right people off. Sales, that's critical. You got to get the right salespeople. Kel Nordstrom, and wrote in his book Funky Business, said that our job as managers is to make talent dance. And he said that about sales. So you got to make salespeople dance. They've got to be very talented. So you got to recruit the right people. And that process begins. You can't hire the right people unless you first know what are the expectations of that job. You have to have a job description, and I'm going to get out of the way from the camera. I don't want to break the lens if he takes a picture. When you have a job description, you know exactly what you're looking for. And I'm not going to read through all that because you can read it better than I am. But what I put up there is all the skill sets that you want in a good salesperson. And you should have in your club, like you should for every job description. But for a salesperson, these are important skills. People that have incredible interpersonal skills, that are good about approaching people in the club, about approaching somebody on the street. The best example I can give why I put that up there is I did something called corporate sales in New York City in the health club business. And I had the joy of going knocking on corporate office doors to see if they wanted to buy memberships. And you have to learn real fast. If you don't have great interpersonal skills, you're never going to be a successful salesperson. The best salesperson is someone who enjoys meeting people, going up and talking to people, and doesn't fear it. And has no problem asking people. So what I've done is I've listed all the different things that are important. You know, it's about going to sales training. I've even put in things like being able to do 3 phone calls a day or make 2 appointments. I don't want to read it, but the point is have a job description for it. If you have a good job description, the second thing you need to have is what's called a structured interview process to identify it. And what I mean by a structured interview process is that you need to develop a set of questions, 2 types, what are called open-ended questions, which are very generic, and closed-ended questions, which are like yes and no type questions, that you ask every single salesperson that you interview. The exact same questions to everybody, so that you can compare the responses of each salesperson against each other. That's how you'll know who is the best responder. But so have a job description, have a structured interview process. And I want to apologize, there's a lot to talk about in 70 minutes. And you know, sales management is like a full day course. So I apologize if we skip some things because it's only 70 minutes. But maybe a really important point that's at the bottom of this slide, which doesn't show real well for you, is that the first place you ought to look for salespeople is within your own staff. Who's your best personal trainer? Who's your best group exercise instructor? Who's your best receptionist at the front desk? Those people tend to become very, very good salespeople. Because a great group exercise instructor is great in front of an audience. If they're great in front of an audience, they're going to be good salespeople. They're going to have the right attitude and right approach. If they're a great personal trainer, that means they have a lot of clients. If they have a lot of clients, they're great salespeople. Even if they don't think they're salespeople, they're great salespeople. Okay? Any employee who is outstanding at service is going to be outstanding at sales. So instead of spending a lot of time trying to find people out in the community to be salespeople, look internally first. That would probably be one of my most important suggestions. The best salespeople at Club Corp usually were people that were Group X people or personal trainers, instead of going out in the street and trying to hire a professional salesperson. Because one of the things you'll notice in the job description is that a salesperson should know as much or more than anybody else about all the programs and services in the club. And I know that you've had speakers today, and you will tomorrow, that talk about what's called relationship selling and personal selling. And one of the most important things as a salespeople you can do is to uncover a person's need. And if you don't know what a person's need is, you can take a feature of your club and make it into a benefit. Right? Well, if you don't know enough about your club and the programs and services, you'll never be able to create benefits for your prospective sale. So that's really important. The next thing is, once you have hired or recruited someone, you have to have a training program for salespeople. And I will tell you that it typically takes 90 days to produce a good salesperson once you've hired them. That's when you're going to know whether they cut it or they don't. And so I would always recommend that you have a training program that spells out specific training things you're going to do over 30 days, 60 days, the first 90 days of any new salesperson. That's part of the sales management process. And some of the things that you could do, I'm going faster than I'm going on the slide, is that when you hire someone, you should have a game plan for every new salesperson to spell out what it is they're going to do over the first 90 days to become the right membership salesperson for your club. What sales training sessions are they going to attend? So include things such as every new salesperson should mirror an existing staff person who sells. Just follow them around and watch. Every new salesperson should go through personal training. Every new salesperson should participate in group exercise classes. Every new salesperson should be trained on your club's systems and programs so they know how to use them. Okay? As part of the development process, and I just listed a few of the things up there so I don't have to read them for you. But the point is that when you're training as a sales manager, one of your primary jobs after planning is to hire and develop the right salespeople. You need to have a 30, 60, 90-day plan for salespeople. And it has to be progressive with the different things they did. So, for example, when I was first trained as a salesperson, one of the tasks I had to do is I had to follow our membership person around on club tours. I had to do 20 club tours my first 30 days alongside the membership person. I wasn't allowed to give the tour, I just had to follow. My second task was then I had to give 20 tours with that salesperson following me so they could check me out to see if I was doing it right. Another task I had to do is do role plays. I had to actually sit across a desk from the membership person and try to sell them. I had to rehearse. She would play the customer, I'd play the salesperson, she'd throw me the tricky question, I had to deal with it. So you should have a lot of role playing as part of your training of your new salesperson. Another thing I had to do is I had to teach group classes because they wanted me to understand what members wanted in the class. I had to follow around a personal trainer. So in essence, you need to do that with your salespeople. You need to have a really progressive system to train them. Okay? Third thing you need to do is make sure that you provide daily feedback to a new salesperson. Meet with a salesperson every single day, even if it's for 5 minutes. And you ought to ask them a couple important questions. How many sales have they made? How many contacts have they made? What have been the greatest challenges to them that day in making sales? What you want to do there is you want to be there to help teach them, and coach them, and mentor them, because selling is so hard. The second thing that you want to do with that new salesperson is set realistic goals for them so that they can always be successful. So if your goal is to have your salespeople sell 8 memberships a week, that's your ultimate goal. When you have a new salesperson, don't give them a goal of 8. Maybe their first month, their goal is 2 a week. Maybe their second month, it is 4 a week. Maybe their third month, it's 8. What you want is them to have success at the beginning because that builds confidence. It'll make it easier for them. If they know they can do 2 a week, when you bump their goal to 4, it doesn't seem so unreasonable because they've been successful. But if you give them 8 right away, after a couple of weeks of selling 2, they're going to be so frustrated they're going to leave. And that's one of the biggest errors I find sales managers make, is they automatically give new salespeople the same goals they give existing salespeople. You need to be a progressive. But I will tell you, at 90 days, if a salesperson can't sell 8 memberships a week, after 90 days, they probably shouldn't be there. That's pretty much a rule of thumb. Most industries do that. And the third thing you need to do is you need to give your salespeople tools. There's a club in Dallas, Texas. It's called Larry North Fitness. Larry has 6 clubs. And they're very nice clubs. They're about $70 US a month. And they're about 1,000 meters in size. Very nice little clubs. And each of his clubs has 2 salespeople. And each salesperson is required to sell 10 memberships a week in his clubs. And he gives them training. But the one thing he doesn't do is he doesn't support them. He doesn't help them generate leads. They have to do it all themselves. When you're training and developing salespeople, you need to support them. And what I mean by that is you need to give them tools. You need to give them advertising. You need to give them direct mail pieces. You need to give them whatever, member referral programs. You need to have something that will help bring people in. Okay? Salespeople aren't order takers. A salesperson should never sit in an office waiting for a phone call or waiting for someone to walk in for a tour. They have to be out there on the floor, talking to members, asking referrals. They need to be out in the community, talking to people, doing things like that. But at the same time, a club and a sales manager needs to support that. So for example, at Crunch, which is where this is from, Crunch does direct mail. It does things to help generate leads for salespeople. Someone will respond to that. A salesperson has to respond and follow up to it. But at least you're supporting them and giving them resources. Don't ever leave a salesperson out there. Don't say achieve 10 goals, sales this week, but we're not going to give you direct mail, we're not going to advertise, we're not going to do anything. One thing they do at World Class in Russia, and I know Richard does it at Compagnia in Sao Paulo, they'll sit down with their salespeople at their sales meetings and find out what's going on. And if they're way behind, they will come up with a program to help generate leads. They work with their salespeople. So that's part of training and developing them. The third thing is you got to provide motivating compensation. Salespeople are very goal-oriented. They want to achieve. And so you have to have a very incentive-driven compensation for a salesperson. And I'm going to talk quite a bit about that. First, I'll talk about a sales manager, the person who manages sales. You need to provide them a compensation plan that's a mix of very small base salary and what's called variable compensation based on how well they are achieving their sales plan. And when I say achieving their sales plan, their incentive should be based not just on actual sales, but on leads generated, prospects generated, and action steps taken. You want to reinforce all the behaviors that you have through compensation. So for example, let's say your club has to sell 100 memberships this month. And you set up compensation. Maybe the sales manager gets $1,000 if you hit your sales goal. If you sell 80% of your goal, they only get 80% of their comp. If they sell 50%, they only get 50%. In other words, you have to put the incentive on them to reach their goal. Right? You have to do that with sales management. But even more importantly, with a salesperson, you do. And I was just going to share some of the different ways that you can provide compensation for salespeople. Remember, most salespeople, if they don't sell, they don't make money. So one way that's done, and this is done in the UK, it's done in the US, it's done in Turkey, it's done in China, so it's done in a lot of places, is they pay them a lump sum fee for every sale. So for example, at Club 1, on a monthly basis, they get paid $25 for every member they bring in, up to 20. From 20 to 30, they then get $40 for every sale. And it keeps going up. So they just get, it's sort of like a bounty. So the more people they bring in, the more money they make. That's one way that you can pay a salesperson. You just pay them a fixed amount for every body that you bring in. Another way, I haven't even put these up, have I? I apologize. I want to make sure I'm, excuse me, I guess I might have been sliding too fast. I apologize. A second way is that you pay them a very small base salary. And then you pay them a percentage of achieving their own sales plan. This is what we did in Club Corp. So in Club Corp, we paid people, our typical salesperson at Club Corp made $50,000 a year, our typical salesperson. We paid them a base salary of $10,000, which isn't very much a year. The other 40 is what they had to make off commission. So what they got is they got a commission. If they hit 100% of their plan, they got 100% commission. If they had 80% of their plan, they got 80%. But we had a hurdle. To get any commission, they at least had to hit 50%. So if they hit 40% of their plan, they made nothing. They just got their base. If they hit 50, then they got 50%. It worked up to 100. If they hit 150% of their plan, they got 150% commission. They made a lot of money. So we gave them an amount to go over. We also gave them bonuses for making and exceeding their plan. So that's another way you can do it. Another way that some clubs in the U.S. do it is they pay people just a percentage of the money they bring in. That's what Larry North does. So if the membership person sells a $1,000 annual membership, the membership person got 20% of it. You know, if they sold a $2,000 membership, they got like 18%. They got a smaller percentage, but they made more money. So there's lots of different ways to pay salespeople, but the point is, it's got to be based on performance, on what I call outcome goals. What are they actually able to achieve? So compensation is incredibly important. So when we talk about this hiring and developing right people, you got to compensate them correctly. What we're going to talk about next, I'm going to put them up because of time, is how do you get salespeople to go from where they are to where you want them to be? How do you motivate them? How do you get them to succeed? Okay? The first thing you got to do is, we talked about, is you got to have incentive-based compensation. There's got to be a lot of incentive in the compensation. The second thing that you have to do is really be clear with them about the expectations that you have for them. They have to know exactly what outcome goals they have and what process goals they have. You have to be really clear for them and let them know, we want you to have this many sales, but by the way, you also need to make this many tours, you need to make this many phone calls, you need to invite this many people into the club, you need to try to get this many member referrals. You have to be really specific with the salesperson. Salespeople need to know what you want out of them, and then they'll go for it. And then you got to coach them and motivate them through. The third thing you got to do is you got to meet with them every single day. You need to meet with your salespeople every day. The best sales managers do that. They meet with their sales staff every single day. It doesn't matter whether it's in the club industry, whether it's in the automobile industry, they meet with their salespeople every day. And they ask them the few little questions they need to. How are they doing? What challenges they have? What barriers are they facing? What's working? What's not working? What can we do to help it work better? You need to keep on top of them. Because if you lose focus of your salespeople and what they're doing, when it comes to the end of the week, they may be way behind their sales plan. And then what are you going to do? So if you're staying on top of them, it's not micromanagement. It's almost more like micro-motivating, because they need that. They need you to stay on top of them. You're not doing their job for them, but you're letting them know how important